Firstly, can I welcome everybody here tonight to this scrutiny meeting. We are being streamed live, as you know. All our meetings now are screened live and on YouTube. We also have the BBC here, who are going to film our proceedings, as far as I understand. So welcome to you. Now, if we go straight to the agenda, attendance, I've had apologies from Chris Boyes and Adele. Is there any other apologies at all? No? Sophie Taylor is finished work and has texted me and to say that she's on her way, but she's coming from Liverpool, and of course there's a football match on outside here, so yeah, so that's difficult. And mentioning the football match, you know, obviously the traffic's not good, so you know, obviously. You know, we'll try and get finished as soon as we can, but obviously that will be determined about with regard to the debate. Item 2, questions from the public. Well, I don't have any.
And none were submitted.
None have been submitted, no. Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. If anybody's got a declaration of interest, can they actually speak up now? So the main item on the agenda, it is a special meeting to discuss the findings of the Task and Finish Group review of One Trafford Partnership. And I think the report has been circulated to all members. I will briefly introduce the report and go through it, not line by line, I can assure you, but paragraph 1 is the background to the report, and it outlines the contract arrangements, the outcome expectations, the specification and timeline of the contract. Paragraph 2 is just to inform the report and members of who sat on the Task and Finish Group. And I would like to thank those members who did sit on the Task and Finish Group. Obviously, all contributed a lot to the findings of the report. Paragraph 3, review approach. Now, this is set out in the report, and you will note that at the first meeting in June 2018, it was agreed that the group would aim to gain a better understanding of the contract and its performance by conducting a number of meetings with the relevant stakeholders. Those stakeholders included the Trafford client team, the trade union representatives, and AMI senior officers. And the task was to understand the contract specifications, also the information gathering sessions to understand where issues had arisen and the reasons for this, and the group sought to understand what was required of AMI under the contract specification and whether these requirements were being met. And the group aim would be to make relevant recommendations to the executive on how the delivery of these services could be improved. These recommendations are set out in the report. Paragraph 4 is the table of the timeline, which is there before us. Paragraph 5, 6, and 7, I'm not going to go through that line by line of the meetings with the stakeholders. Obviously I assume that you've all read the report. Instead, I'll just summarise the findings of the Task and Finish group following all the meetings we had with the stakeholders. Clearly, a lot of concerns were highlighted, and most notable were the poor performance in many areas, the poor communication across all aspects of the contract. Trade union representatives highlighted poor morale of staff. It was clear that issues were raised about the constant changes of AMI managers and the failures to implement new technology as promised during the tender process, and failure to deliver on key performance indicators. Our annual services planning did not take place, and as was promised, through the contract contract details that was put forward at the beginning. There's a lack of leadership and governance, and I think this summary is not exhaustive of all the concerns. And finally, just to say that the recommendations are here in the report, and I'll open it up for discussion. So, yeah, Aidan.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't intend to speak long, because I think that the report before us really speaks for itself. It is the end product of an extensive piece of work examining the services provided on behalf of the Council by AMI. Many of us here are capable of relying upon anecdotal evidence and also the accounts of local residents to try and reach a conclusion as to the quality of the services provided. But the report does spell out in much finer detail, as far as I'm concerned, a large range of concerns regarding service provision, as the key performance indicators that have been circulated with the report at the end of the document also highlight. I believe that the process that's been undertaken by the committee and by the Task and Finish group has been extensive, inclusive and measured, and I welcome the conclusions that have been reached. Absolutely no hesitation in commending to the Council's Executive the recommendations contained in paragraph 9 of the report. However, if any other members have any comments that they wish to make, I'm more than happy to engage with them on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yeah, Councillor Brian Shaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was on the Task and Finish group, and all the information that was given. But I can't support option 1 for the simple reason it assumes that we're going to get a better deal somewhere else and we're not going to have mistakes. The report that came out from the BBC today quite clearly shows that we're not the only authority that have suffered problems in one of the areas that are on the AMI contract. 1.8 million missed bin complaints. There's a lot of effort been put in over the years, and effort has been needed. Nobody can argue against the fact that there have been lots of mistakes made in the past by AMI. But I personally think that there's been a hell of a lot of work done to improve it. And I think it is being improved. If you look at the latest KPIs, there's a clear improvement there. I think they're going in the right way. And I take on board what you said, Chair, with regards to the change in management. I've, like you, have seen that change in management. But I believe in the quality. I'm not saying the management previously wasn't quality, but the quality in this management seems to be taking it to the right places. They've listened to what the complaints have been, and they've needed to listen to those complaints, but I think we're going in the right way. My option would be option 3, to work with them and improve the service. And in fact, and I can't remember where I saw it, so don't quote me on this, but the executive member has stated on some of the services that he was delighted with the service. I can't remember what it is. All I'm trying to say, Chair, is that they moved it in the right direction. I know this, I'll find it. I will find it, and I'll share it with you, Steve. Because at the end of the day, and I know the cost of implementing option 1 is not relevant, so I believe, to this committee. But I think it's important if we are making a suggestion, that I think it's important that we know the implications of, could we actually fund that? What would it actually cost? Could we afford to do it? And I don't think we could. You know, we hear about the pressures we may be under, and we are under. So my preference would be to work with what we've got, continue those improvements. Thank you, Chair.
I think we have to face up to it now, though, that this contract has been running for nearly 4 years now. They've been encountered with fines because of they're not delivered on the contract. I think the recommendations, the wide-ranging recommendations, and I think it is for the executive to look at those those recommendations and to see and agree, if any, that they want to support those recommendations. Our findings, it's absolutely factual, and I don't think anybody's questioned the findings. You only need to look at the contract review findings, key findings that our officers did when we actually scrutinised the contract findings, and it's a litany of failure, quite frankly, and that has to be acknowledged by us all, because we all sat through, well, the Task and Finish group members sat through and listened to that. So, you know, the recommendations, as I say, are wide-ranging, and it is, if these are agreed, then it is up to the executive to consider the feasibility of any of those recommendations, and whether that be legal or financial. That wasn't our task to do. Our task was to look at you know, the delivery of the service that is being provided by Amy, and that is exactly what we've done. And I think the recommendations reflect what can be done if the executive are minded to do. But they would have to do some work around that viability, feasibility of the financial aspect of coming out of a contract or whatever. But it's not, you know, the 3 options, they're different options. So they could decide to remain within. So that would be exactly their decision. It's not our decision to make. Councillor Ray Bowker.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to endorse what the Chairman has just said. I think this report sums up a very good Task and Finish group, and it is comprehensive, and we dealt with things extremely thoroughly. And at the end of the day, we've come up with 3 options there that the executive are going to consider. And unlike Brian Shaw, I could support the option 1. And I feel that we as a group, as a Task and Finish group, we've done an excellent job. And I feel that it's very comprehensive. It's well summarised here, and I can certainly go along with things, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations as set out in the title sheet seem to me to be perfectly acceptable, whereas they differ slightly from the recommendations in paragraph 9, in that the recommendations in paragraph 9 are somewhat more detailed. Can I suggest, Chairman, that the second paragraph from the end of part 9, it says, if it is determined all options are viable, then option 1 is the preferred option of the Scrutiny Committee. I would feel an awful lot more comfortable if that line wasn't there, simply because it commits this committee to a position before the facts are known. Ultimately, the Scrutiny Committee may end up getting an awful lot more detail on all 3 options, and it may simply be that option 1 isn't viable or is less viable than the others for financial reasons, deliverability reasons, whatever. I just think that penultimate paragraph is a little too previous to be including at this stage, whereas all the rest of that paragraph, all the item 9, it seems perfectly sensible. Just by thought, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what you think. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I was not a member of this task and finish group, so I came to this rather impressive report late. I tend to support both what the Chair has said and what Ray has said, that we have 3 options here, which are to be considered by the executive. There will be other fora in which we can challenge, discuss and listen. I personally find the first one frightening. The cost and the disruption involved in recommendation 1 is horrendous, but then that is not what we're here to recommend. So I think we should accept the recommendations and continue any process of challenge or refinement through the executive and through full council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Yeah, Councillor Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairman. I think also it was an extremely good piece of work, this, but I do believe, and I mentioned it in the very last meeting that we had of the task and finish group, that without the costings, and I know it was pointed out to me that that wasn't our duty to do that, but without those costings, I don't think it was a complete piece of work. I think we needed that because it's difficult to give any of the recommendations without knowing how much it's actually going to cost the residents of this borough going forward. So, you know, I did put that on record that I thought it wasn't complete. I still don't think it's complete. I think there are good options there for the executive to consider, but I think so that we could get our recommendations correct in the first place, we needed to look at the cost implications of what we were actually putting as a recommendation to the executive chairman.
Yeah, I mean, we did have this discussion, as you rightly said, and the fact is that, as I said before, that our role was to scrutinise the delivery, and I think we've done that. The delivery of Amy, I think we've done that. And we've set out a range of options. And I think, you know, if we'd gone into the financials, then we could have been spending a long, long time on speculating what the costs may be of coming out of a contract and what the legality is of coming out of a contract. And that, you know, we could have been completely wasting our time because the executive might not wanted to go down that route. So I think we've been sensible and stuck to what you know, what the scope was, and I think, you know, the financials, including any of the options or the legalities of any of the options, needs to be dealt with by the executive, who ultimately will make the decision. So you know, I hear what you say, but I think we've stuck to what we actually agreed in terms of the scope.
Chair, can I just qualify what I said about not being able to support option 1? That was based on the statement about subject to feasibility. Option 1 is the preferred choice of the Scrutiny Committee. It's not my preferred choice. And I'm on the Scrutiny Committee.
Well, we discussed it and we said that the recommendations, as they stood at the task and finish group, would come to this meeting tonight.
We didn't vote on it, though, Chairman, did we?
Well, I asked the members of the task and finish group. You know.
Well, I'm a member that was member.
Well, I know you were, and you were. Well, we did, yeah. And we brought it to this.
No.
Well,
Sorry.
I did. I remember talking about it.
If I can, Chair, as I understand it, decisions of the Scrutiny Committee don't have to be unanimous. I think that the recommendations were pretty clear when the task and finish group was convened. And I just want to reiterate what you said before about this not becoming a form of speculation, because we're not in a position to speculate about financial implications. I think what we've done here is provided a report for the executive to consider, which contains a range of different options for consideration of executive members and of council officers, and we have requested of them that they engage in that process and come back. If at any point later on in the process there is a role for the Scrutiny Committee to take, then I'd welcome that. But as far as I'm concerned, this has been a stellar piece of work that's been undertaken by the Task and Finish Group and by the Scrutiny Committee, and I don't have any hesitation in recommending any aspect of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I did say that raise the concerns about that penultimate line in the part 9. By including that penultimate line, it turns this Scrutiny Committee into a forum for speculation, because we are essentially being asked to make a recommendation when we do not know the full facts. Mr. Chairman, I can't support that.
That is qualified by being ensuring that it's a viable option. Now, nobody would ask the executive to do something that was not viable, and that's why that is the safeguard in relation to that is the viable. And if it's not viable, it won't happen.
Maybe a viable option to pull this town hall down and start from scratch. No, we want to do it. Anything can be viable, Mr. Chairman. It's whether it's more desirable than the other options.
Well, that's a view that you individually will take, you know, but the executive will take.
Don't want to labour the point, and no pun intended. But in that viability, isn't the cost of an option, isn't that really, really fundamental to it? And we haven't got that. So it could be that we've done a piece of work and we're making recommendations that have no value, because, as you said, the executive make a decision based on affordability. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would bet that option 1 is not affordable. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, you know, this is the report that's here before us, and as chair, I stand by the recommendations as they stand, and I would put it. Yeah, sorry, John.
Can I just? This is a language thing, and language is something that I really do believe I'm quite good at. You may agree with that, or you may not. There's one word that's wrong, and that's the word viable. Viable means capable of independent existence and life. If you were to replace that word viable with the single word feasible, then all these arguments would go away instantly. Thank you.
Okay, well, can we agree with that change of word to the recommendations? Yeah? Okay, right. Is everybody agreed? Is everybody agreed? Right. Well, thank you very much. That actually concludes the meeting. I think it was important that you raised, your concerns, and we take them on board. And I think we've got to the place where, we're all satisfied with the report and the recommendations. So I thank you all for for that. And just to complete the agenda, item 5 is urgent business, and I don't have any urgent business, and that actually concludes the meeting. And can I thank you all for your attendance and your